Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going deep on cybersecurity.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, it's a wild world out there.
It is.
We've got a ton of stuff to get through.
Yeah.
You sent over some really interesting news articles,
Hmm.
a bunch of blog posts from security researchers, and even a breaking news update came in while we were prepping for this.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it seems like every day there's a new threat or vulnerability to worry about.
Yeah.
So today we're going to kind of try to sift through all of this and figure out what matters most for you guys.
Okay.
What are the real risks that you need to be aware of, and what can you actually do to protect yourself?
Yeah, I think it's really striking just how many different cybersecurity issues we're seeing now. It's
Yeah.
not just about hackers stealing your data anymore. We're
Yeah.
talking political interference, vulnerabilities in everyday devices,
Right.
and even threats that are coming from inside organizations.
Yeah. You shared an article with me about Trump threatening Zuckerberg with jail time, and I have to admit that one caught my eye.
Yeah.
It's not the first time we've seen politicians kind of taking aim at these tech CEOs,
Yeah.
and it makes you wonder, is this becoming the new normal?
Yeah, it's a concerning trend for sure,
Yeah.
especially when you think about the arrest of Telegram's CEO in France.
Right.
These actions could really stifle innovation and free speech.
Mm.
And our government's trying to make these platforms, more compliant,
Right.
even if it means compromising user privacy.
Right.
And what does it mean for these companies that are trying to operate globally?
Yeah, definitely raises a lot of questions about, the future of the internet,
Yeah.
who gets to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of control, there's the whole debate about TikTok's security risks.
Oh, right.
It seems like it's constantly in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
But is it really that much more dangerous than other social media platforms?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I think we need to look at all platforms critically, not just the ones that are politically convenient to target.
Right.
Remember, every platform collects data on you.
Yeah.
It's just about being mindful of what you're sharing and who you're sharing it with.
That's a good reminder that we can't just blindly trust these companies to protect our data.
Right.
We need to be proactive and take steps to protect ourselves. Keeping your systems safe is super important as businesses rely more and more on digital systems, and that's where turnkey cybersecurity can really help.
Yeah, we're here to help small businesses just like yours make sure they're safe and sound in this crazy world of cybersecurity. And we offer a whole suite of services specifically tailored for you. So that's ensuring CMMC compliance and doing penetration testing. We also run vulnerability scans, and we can help you develop a comprehensive risk assessment.
And it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it doesn't.
We handle incident response, should the unfortunate happen, and we guide you through migrations like GCC. We just want to make sure your transitions are smooth and that you're secure.
It's all about peace of mind, right? You focus on what you do best, running your business, and we'll make sure that your digital world is safe and sound.
But let's shift gears for a second, talk about something a little closer to home.
Okay.
The Tesla Cybertruck window vulnerability.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a thief just peeling off the window like a sticker.
Crazy.
You think a vehicle that's marketed for its toughness would have, better security than that?
Yeah, I know. It just goes to show that even with all of the advancements in technology,
Right.
we're still making some pretty basic security blunders.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Pixel 9 eavesdropping issue.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Even if Google's explanation about that Now Playing app is true,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it's listening by default is a bit creepy.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Do you think?
It makes you wonder what other seemingly harmless apps might be, collecting data without our knowledge.
Exactly.
You've really got me thinking about my own phone settings now.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's time for a digital spring cleaning.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's so easy to forget about all those permissions that we grant apps
Mhm.
without really thinking about the implications.
Right.
So a little digital housekeeping can go a long way.
For sure.
But let's move on to a different kind of threat,
Okay.
one that comes from inside an organization.
Okay.
The story about that former infrastructure engineer trying to extort his old company.
Right.
It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the biggest threat comes from within.
Yeah, 35 years in prison.
Yeah,
That's a steep price to pay for trying to shut down servers and extort money.
it is.
It really makes you realize how seriously these kinds of attacks are taken.
Yeah, and it highlights the importance of insider threat mitigation
Hmm.
for businesses. Employee monitoring is a controversial topic, but in some cases, it might be a necessary evil.
Yeah.
Companies need to find that balance between respecting employee privacy
What?
and protecting their sensitive data.
For sure. And speaking of sensitive data, let's talk about Telegram.
Okay.
The arrest of its CEO on charges of distributing child sexual abuse material,
Wow.
money laundering, and drug trafficking is a big deal.
Yeah.
It seems like their hands-off approach to content moderation might have finally caught up with them.
Yeah, Telegram has always been a bit of an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the lack of moderation has attracted a diverse user base,
Right.
but it's also made it a haven for criminal activity.
Yeah.
This arrest raises some really tough questions about the responsibility of platforms to prevent harm.
Yeah, for sure. And what about the encryption debate surrounding Telegram?
Oh, right.
Matthew Green, a cryptography expert, was pretty critical of their approach.
Yeah.
He was arguing that their encryption isn't as secure as they claim,
Mm.
especially for group messages. So it seems like they might be more focused on marketing than actual security.
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
You know, the potential consequences of Durov being pressured to give up encryption keys are huge,
Right.
especially with the Russian military's reliance on Telegram.
Mm.
This situation really shows how fragile encryption can be,
Yeah.
especially when powerful forces are involved.
It makes you wonder, can we really rely on any tech company to fully protect our privacy and our data?
Yeah.
Especially when governments come knocking.
Right.
It feels like a real David and Goliath situation.
It's a constant battle, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But speaking of battles, the DOJ's lawsuit against Georgia Tech for cybersecurity fraud
Oh, yeah.
is a reminder that even prestigious institutions can fall short when it comes to security.
Allegedly lying about their security score to secure government contracts. I
Yeah.
mean, that's pretty bold.
It is shocking that a university would prioritize cost savings over security,
Right.
especially when dealing with sensitive government data.
So what's the takeaway here?
Well, this case highlights the importance of the False Claims Act.
Okay.
It gives whistleblowers a powerful tool to expose fraud against the government, the potential financial incentives,
Right.
which can be up to 30% of the government's recovery.
Wow.
Definitely encourages people to come forward.
Yeah. It's like a cybersecurity bounty program
Right.
for exposing systemic fraud.
Yeah,
That's really interesting.
it is.
A good thing there are these mechanisms in place to hold organizations accountable.
Yeah.
But speaking of accountability, let's talk about some of the specific vulnerabilities that you highlighted.
Okay.
Unpatched Windows zero-day vulnerabilities.
Right.
That sounds pretty scary.
It is concerning.
Yeah.
These vulnerabilities can disable important security features, like Credential Guard.
Right.
And to make matters worse, Windows doesn't even flag the affected systems.
So users could be completely unaware that they're vulnerable.
Exactly.
So it's like having a lock on your door but leaving the key under the mat. You think you're protected, but you're wide open to attack.
Yeah. And what about that CLFS bug that's been causing the blue screen of death?
Oh, right.
Microsoft seems pretty dismissive about it.
Mm.
But, you know, a system crash can be a huge disruption.
Oh, for sure.
It raises questions about how software companies prioritize security updates.
Yeah.
Do they focus on fixing every bug, or do they prioritize based on perceived severity and impact?
Right.
Sometimes it feels like security takes a backseat to other concerns like speed and functionality.
Which is a problem because as we rely more and more on technology, the stakes just keep getting higher.
Absolutely.
Speaking of high stakes, the data breach at that public data repository with 3 billion background check records,
Oh, wow. Yeah,
that's a real wake-up call.
it is.
I mean, that's a lot of sensitive information just floating around out there.
Yeah, this breach really underscores how important data security is
Yeah.
for any organization that handles personal information. It makes you wonder if there should be a way for individuals to opt out of having their data included in these repositories.
Right.
Do we really have any control over our own information anymore?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it's not just these massive repositories that are vulnerable.
Right.
Take the Al-Anon data breach, for example.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're a support group
I
for
can-
crying out loud.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be a safe space for people in recovery.
Right.
And now their members' names, emails, passwords,
Wow.
and personal information are out there for anyone to see.
That's all.
Yeah, it's a serious breach of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And it highlights the potential harm that cyber attacks can have.
Yeah.
It's not just about losing data.
Right.
It's about real people's lives being disrupted
Yeah.
and their privacy being violated.
Absolutely.
It's a sobering reminder that cybersecurity is about more than just protecting our devices and data.
Mm-hmm.
It's about protecting people and their well-being.
Yeah.
But let's move on to something a little less heavy.
Okay.
What about these new anti-theft features Google is rolling out for Android phones?
Oh, yeah.
Using the accelerometer and gyro to detect theft is pretty ingenious.
It is.
It's like a built-in security guard for your phone.
Yeah, it's a good example of how technology can be used to enhance security.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to remember that no system is foolproof.
Right.
Even the most secure devices can have vulnerabilities, as
Yeah.
we saw with that new iPhone bug that can crash the device with a specific sequence of characters.
It's like a digital Achilles heel,
Right.
a tiny flaw that can bring down the whole system.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that security is an ongoing process, and we need to be constantly evolving to stay ahead of the bad guys.
Absolutely. The threat landscape is constantly changing,
Yeah.
so we need to be adaptable and proactive
Right.
if you want to protect ourselves.
Speaking of protection, you shared an article about concerns over Chinese-made devices
Oh, right.
and the potential for espionage.
Yeah.
This has been making headlines for years,
It has.
but it seems like it's becoming even more relevant now.
Yeah, especially with the FBI supporting those concerns.
Right.
It definitely makes you think twice about buying that cheap Chinese-made router or security camera.
Yeah, but then again, switching to domestically produced alternatives can be expensive.
Yeah.
It's a tough choice.
It's a dilemma.
Yeah.
You know, you're constantly weighing security against affordability and convenience.
Right, and it's not just devices that are vulnerable.
Right.
What about those office building badges that can be easily cloned?
Oh, yeah.
We might be sacrificing security for convenience without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's like those easy open packages.
Right.
That take 10 minutes to actually open.
Exactly.
Sometimes convenience isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Maybe it's time we all start thinking more seriously about security upgrades.
Yeah.
Like multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
It might seem like a hassle,
Mm-hmm.
but it could make a big difference.
Yeah. It's about weighing the risks and making informed choices.
Right.
And speaking of choices, let's talk about something that's both fascinating and disturbing.
Okay.
Deepfakes.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that there are websites out there that can be used to create non-consensual nude images is deeply troubling. It's
Yeah.
like something out of a dystopian sci-fi movie.
And the fact that these websites are being used to target politicians and teenagers is even more unsettling.
It is.
It's like a weaponized form of humiliation and harassment.
Yeah.
It's good that the San Francisco city attorney is suing these companies,
Yeah.
but I wonder if it'll be enough to stop the spread of this technology.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
Regulating emerging technology is always a challenge.
Right.
Especially when it comes to something as potentially harmful as deepfakes. It's a reminder that we need to be having serious conversations about the ethical implications of these technologies
Absolutely.
before they get out of control.
But before we dive too deep into that ethical rabbit hole,
Okay.
let's shift our focus to something that might seem a bit more mundane,
Right.
but is equally important. Industrial control systems.
Oh, yeah.
You shared a report that thousands of these systems in the US and the UK
Right.
are accessible on the public internet,
Yeah.
many without passwords.
I know, it's terrifying.
That's terrifying.
It is.
We're talking about systems that control power grids,
Yeah.
water treatment plants,
Mm-hmm.
transportation systems,
Right.
and other critical infrastructure.
It's true.
An attack on one of these systems could have catastrophic consequences.
Absolutely.
It's like something out of a disaster movie.
Right.
Only this is real life.
Yeah.
We're so reliant on these systems,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
So what can we do about it?
Well,
It feels like we've just scratched the surface of the cybersecurity iceberg here.
we have, but don't despair.
Okay.
The first step is awareness.
Right.
And you've already taken that step by starting this deep dive.
Okay.
Now let's figure out what actionable steps you can take to protect yourself.
That's good. Okay, so we've talked about the threats, but what can we actually do to protect ourselves?
Right.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this information.
I understand, but the good news is that there are some simple, practical steps you can take
Okay.
to significantly improve your security.
Great. Let's hear them. Where do we start?
First and foremost, be mindful of your digital footprint.
Okay.
Think about the information that you're sharing online
Mm-hmm.
and who you're sharing it with.
Right.
Do you really need to provide your home address to that online store?
That's a good point. And I'm also guilty of just blindly clicking accept
Yeah.
on those cookie banners and privacy policies.
Yeah.
I know I should read them, but who has the time?
I hear you. They can be long and tedious.
Yeah.
But it's worth taking a few minutes to understand what data you're giving away.
Okay.
And while we're talking about being mindful,
Yeah.
let's talk passwords.
Okay.
I know it's basic, But using strong, unique passwords for each of your accounts is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and don't forget about multi-factor authentication.
Exactly.
It might seem like an extra step,
Mm-hmm.
but it adds a significant layer of security.
It does. It's like having a second lock on your door.
Right.
Makes it that much harder for attackers to get in.
Okay.
Speaking of doors,
Yeah?
let's talk about that story you sent over
Okay.
about the researcher who bypassed TSA security.
Right, it sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, right.
I mean, the fact that someone was able to exploit vulnerabilities in the cockpit access system
Right.
and known crew member software is pretty concerning.
It is.
Even with all the security measures in place at airports,
Yeah.
determined individuals can still find ways to slip through the cracks.
It's a good reminder that no system is perfect.
Right.
And that security is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
We need to be constantly evaluating and improving our systems to stay ahead of the bad guys.
And it's not just about physical security either.
Right.
The news about Halliburton, the oil giant, being hacked is a reminder that even massive corporations with supposedly robust security measures can be vulnerable to cyber attacks.
It's true.
It's kind of scary to think that a company that plays such a vital role in our energy infrastructure could be compromised like that.
Yeah.
What are the implications of something like that?
Well, these attacks can disrupt operations,
Right.
compromise sensitive data, and even impact national security.
Wow.
It's a reminder that cybersecurity is not just an IT issue, it's a business issue, a national security issue,
Right.
and ultimately a societal issue.
Yeah, it really drives home the point that we all have a stake in cybersecurity.
We do.
And it's not just big corporations that are at risk.
Right.
You also sent over a story about the American Radio Relay League
Oh, right.
being hit with a ransomware attack.
Yeah, $1 million ransom.
I know.
That's devastating.
Especially for a nonprofit organization.
Right. It highlights the importance of having robust cybersecurity practices in place, regardless of the size or nature of your organization.
It's also a reminder that even if you have insurance,
Yeah,
recovering from a ransomware attack can be a nightmare.
it can.
You're not just paying the ransom, you're rebuilding systems,
Right.
restoring data,
Yeah.
and trying to regain the trust of your members or customers.
It's like trying to put the pieces back together after a digital hurricane.
Yeah, for sure. And while we're talking about disruptions,
Okay.
the data breach at FlightAware,
Right.
the company that tracks flight data,
Yeah.
is a good reminder of just how much personal information we share online without even realizing it.
It's true.
It's scary to think that all that data could be out there vulnerable to hackers.
Yeah.
I check FlightAware all the time to see if my flights are on time.
Uh-huh.
I never really thought about the security implications.
It's a good reminder that we need to be mindful of what information we're sharing online and who we're sharing it with. We also need to demand better data security practices from the companies that collect and store our information.
Absolutely. We can't just assume that our data is safe.
Right.
We need to be proactive about protecting it.
Yeah.
Speaking of proactive protection,
Okay.
what about those concerns over vulnerabilities in TP-Link devices?
Right.
It seems like every other week there's a news story about a security flaw in some internet-connected device.
It's a legitimate concern,
Yeah.
especially given that many of these devices are made in China and may contain backdoors or vulnerabilities that could be exploited for espionage. The fact that the FBI is supporting these concerns suggests that the threat is real
Right.
and shouldn't be taken lightly.
It's tough because as consumers, we're often drawn to the most affordable and convenient option.
Right.
But maybe it's time we start prioritizing security over price and convenience.
It's all about finding that balance.
Yeah.
And speaking of balance, we need to remember that security isn't just about protecting ourselves from digital threats. Right.
Physical security and cybersecurity are increasingly intertwined.
Right.
Take those office building badges that can be easily cloned, for example.
Right. If someone can just walk in with a fake badge,
Right.
it undermines the whole security system.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that we need to think holistically about security,
Yeah.
considering both physical and digital vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And organizations need to implement layered security measures to mitigate these risks.
Right.
And while we're talking about layers,
Okay.
let's circle back to deepfakes for a moment.
Right.
The San Francisco City Attorney's lawsuit against those deepfake websites
Yeah.
is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it's just the tip of the iceberg.
It feels like we're entering a whole new era of disinformation and manipulation.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know how to combat it.
It is a challenge, but we need to start by raising awareness about the potential harms of this technology
Mm.
and empowering individuals to identify and report deepfakes.
Education is key.
The more people know about these threats,
Right.
the less likely they are to fall victim to them.
Absolutely.
Speaking of falling victim, that story about the bank CEO who embezzled millions using a cryptocurrency scheme
Oh, right.
is a reminder that cyber threats can also come from within an organization.
That's true. It highlights the importance of internal controls, audits,
Right.
and employee monitoring to prevent and detect fraud.
Right.
It's a reminder that human greed can be a powerful motivator,
Yeah.
and we need to have systems in place to mitigate those risks.
It's a good reminder that cybersecurity is not just about technology, it's about people too.
Right.
We need to build a security-conscious culture from the ground up.
Yeah.
And speaking of culture,
Okay.
the situation in Columbus, Ohio,
Right.
it seems like they initially tried to downplay the severity of their data breach,
Yeah.
but later admitted that data was indeed stolen.
It happens.
Yeah, what's the takeaway there?
Well, this highlights the importance of transparency. Organizations need to be upfront about breaches and
Wow.
provide accurate information to those who are affected.
Trying to cover up a breach only makes things worse.
Yeah.
It erodes trust
Mm-hmm.
and can lead to further damage.
Honesty and transparency are essential for building and maintaining trust.
Okay.
Speaking of trust,
Yeah.
the new cybersecurity rules proposed by the FAA for airplanes
Right.
show how seriously the government is taking cybersecurity and critical infrastructure.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
As we rely more and more on technology, we need to make sure that our critical infrastructure is protected.
Absolutely.
That includes everything from airplanes to power grids to water treatment plants.
It does. Cybersecurity is not just about protecting data and devices.
Right.
It's about safeguarding our way of life.
Right. And that brings us back to the Al-Anon data breach.
Oh, yeah.
It's a heartbreaking reminder that cyber attacks can have real-world consequences
They can.
that go far beyond financial loss.
It's true.
The impact on those individuals in recovery is immeasurable. They relied on Al-Anon for anonymity and support,
Right.
and now that trust has been broken.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we need to be sensitive to the human cost of these attacks
Yeah.
and provide support to those who've been affected.
We also need to hold organizations accountable for protecting the data they collect,
Right.
especially when it involves sensitive personal information.
Absolutely. And speaking of accountability,
Yeah.
I was glad to see that the company behind those fake Biden robocalls was fined
Oh, right, yeah.
for failing to validate caller ID information.
It's about time.
Right.
Those calls were so annoying,
Yeah.
and they really eroded trust in our communication systems.
Yeah.
We need more of this kind of enforcement to deter future misconduct.
Agreed. And speaking of evolving threats,
Okay.
the National Security Agency issued a warning about living off the land attacks.
What is that?
So these attacks use legitimate tools and techniques
wow.
to evade detection,
Okay.
which makes them much harder to spot.
It's like a cyber ninja sneaking in through the back door.
Right.
Yeah. It's a reminder that we need to stay informed about these new tactics and adapt our security practices accordingly.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and wait for attacks to happen.
Right.
We need to be proactive about hunting for threats and strengthening our defenses.
Okay.
Speaking of proactive measures,
Yeah.
Ginnie Mae, the government-funded mortgage backer, is now requiring lenders to report breaches within 48 hours.
That seems like a good move.
It is.
The faster we know about a breach, the faster we can contain it
Right.
and minimize the damage.
It's a reminder that organizations need to have incident response plans in place
Yeah.
so they can handle breaches quickly and effectively.
And those plans need to be tested regularly
Yes,
to make sure they actually work.
exactly.
You never know when you might need them.
That's true.
Speaking of things not working as planned, Microsoft's August updates caused boot issues and freezes on some Windows servers.
Oh, wow.
It just goes to show that even patches and updates can introduce new vulnerabilities.
It's a catch-22 because while updates are essential for fixing security flaws,
Right.
they can also cause unintended consequences.
Right.
Organizations need to carefully test updates before deploying them widely,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to have rollback plans in place in case something goes wrong.
It's like walking a tightrope between security and stability.
Right.
You never know when you might lose your balance.
That's true.
Speaking of losing your balance,
Okay.
that vulnerability in the common log file system, CLFS, in Windows,
Yeah.
that can cause a blue screen of death,
Right.
highlights the complexity of modern software systems.
It does, and the fact that Microsoft initially dismissed the severity of the bug is concerning.
Yeah,
It's a reminder that even seemingly minor vulnerabilities can have a significant impact.
right.
And software companies need to be responsive to security concerns raised by researchers and users.
It's a reminder that we can't just blindly trust software companies to have our best interests at heart.
Right.
We need to be vigilant and do our own research.
We do.
Speaking of vigilance,
Okay.
remember that data breach of the 3 billion record repository we talked about earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it turns out a sister website inadvertently exposed administrator credentials.
Oh, wow.
It's a reminder that even simple oversights can have serious consequences.
Yeah. It reinforces the importance of basic security hygiene,
Right.
strong password policies,
Mhm.
multi-factor authentication,
Yeah.
and protecting sensitive information.
Yeah,
These things can make a big difference.
for sure. And speaking of sensitive information,
Okay.
it's mind-boggling that thousands of industrial control systems are still accessible on the public internet without passwords.
I know it's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
These systems control our power grids,
Right.
water treatment plants, and other critical infrastructure.
Yeah, an attack on one of these systems could have catastrophic consequences.
Absolutely.
We need to invest in securing these systems
Yeah.
and ensuring their resilience against cyber attacks. It's not just about protecting data. It's about safeguarding our way of life.
Well said, and that's a perfect segue into our final topic for today.
Right.
The ethical considerations surrounding cybersecurity.
Yeah, it seems like every time we talked about cybersecurity, the ethical dilemmas just keep getting bigger, more complex.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
You're right, it's a constantly evolving landscape,
Yeah.
but I think it's helpful to start by acknowledging that technology itself
Okay.
isn't inherently good or bad.
Right.
It's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And like any tool, it can be used for positive or negative purposes.
That makes sense. So it's not about demonizing technology. It's about figuring out how to use it responsibly and ethically.
Exactly.
But how do we even begin to define those ethical boundaries,
Yeah.
especially in a field that's as fast-paced as cybersecurity?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
But I think it starts with open and honest conversations about the potential impact of these technologies.
Real good.
We need to be thinking about the unintended consequences, the
Right.
potential for misuse,
Mm-hmm.
and the impact on individual rights and freedoms.
It feels like we're constantly playing catch-up, though.
Yeah.
By the time we figure out the ethical implications of one technology,
Right.
there are 3 more emerging
Yeah.
that are even more powerful
Mm-hmm.
and potentially dangerous.
It's true. It can feel overwhelming,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to remember that we're not powerless in this situation.
Okay.
We can demand better from the companies that are developing these technologies.
Right.
We can push for regulations that prioritize ethical considerations,
Mm-hmm.
and we can educate ourselves and others about the potential risks and benefits.
You mentioned regulations.
Yeah.
Do you think governments have a role to play in shaping the ethical landscape of cybersecurity?
Absolutely. Governments have a responsibility to protect their citizens from harm,
Right.
and that includes harm that can be inflicted through technology. But it's a delicate balance.
Right.
We don't want to stifle innovation
No.
or infringe on individual liberties.
It's like walking a tightrope between security and freedom.
Yeah,
Too much of one, and you risk losing the other.
that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it's something we need to be mindful of
Mm.
as we navigate these complex issues.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges,
Right.
but let's end on a more positive note.
Okay.
What gives you hope when it comes to the future of cybersecurity and ethics?
You know what gives me hope is seeing more and more people engaging in these conversations.
Yeah.
The fact that we're even having this discussion is a positive sign.
Yeah.
It means that people are starting to realize the importance of these issues.
That's encouraging, and it's a reminder that we're not alone in this.
Right.
There are a lot of smart, dedicated people working to make the digital world
Yeah,
a safer and more ethical place.
exactly. And the more we work together,
Mhm.
the more progress we'll make.
So what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with today?
Cybersecurity is not just a technical issue. It's a human issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's about protecting our values, our rights, and our way of life in the digital age.
Yeah.
And it's a responsibility we all share.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into cybersecurity.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the latest threats and vulnerabilities
Mm-hmm.
to the ethical considerations that keep us up at night.
It's been a fascinating journey,
So it has.
and I hope our listeners feel more informed and empowered
Yeah.
to navigate the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity.
Me too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, stay safe,
Mhm.
stay informed, and stay curious.